What's going on, guys? We are back talking about what is the best Rocket League tournament format. Now, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and again, I'm just going to throw my opinions out there. Not necessarily the correct answers, but we'll go through what's coming up in DreamHack. We'll go over how that is working, and then we're going to go over some alternatives for a 3-day style event like DreamHack to maybe change up some of the format. But let's get right into it. So what is the best option for a 3-day event is what we're trying to decide here. We won't get any solid answers, but I want to throw in my input and some input from Twitter as well. And of course, if you have any input, throw it in the comments below as we go through this. But first, let's start with what the tournament is trying to do. There's criteria, of course. There's budget, probably the most important. And that's the amount of computers, the amount of space they have to set up these computers, the amount of equipment they have to bring because they have to set up all these computers, the amount of staff they have to have on hand. You can't have every single person playing at the same time. It's just like nearly impossible, generally. Of course, if you have a giant budget, maybe you can have that go. Who knows? So that's a big one. Obviously, budget is very, very important. Then there's viewer hype. Viewers want to see matches that matter. They want to see showcase matches of top teams, or at least close matches that actually mean a lot. And I think that's going to be something that kind of conflicts with the player fairness bit. But I think viewer hype probably more important than player fairness. Player fairness, obviously, like, you want the best teams to do well, but at the end of the day, you want storylines, you want teams to upset other teams, in certain possibilities to create these storylines, but you want it generally fair. But still, on any given day, someone could beat someone else, and there's always weird rules of player fairness where it's like, oh, do you go single, like, elimination bracket? Oh, but people think double elim is fair, but technically triple elim is fair. Technically quadruple elim is fair. Like, you're never gonna find that perfect showcase where in viewer hype, single elim probably way hyper because you get to see these teams. They have it one chance here versus in a double elim where it's like, oh, okay, they lost, but they're still in the tournament. Can flip side make a run through the lower bracket? Yada, yada, yada. It's not as important. So there's a fine line to go between viewer hype and player fairness, and, you know, where it's going there. Then length. Obviously, you have 3 days to do this event. You need to get all these games done. Length could also mean, like, what games get streamed. I don't think every single game needs to be streamed, but as the tournament goes on, probably every single game should be streamed. That's like the hard part to try and manage. So let's get into what DreamHack's format is, and then I'll say why I don't really like it in certain scenarios. Now, we're not going to talk about best of 3s, best of 5s, best of 7s here. We talked about that a little bit in the previous video. If you want to check it out, it's on the YouTubes. But let's get into this. So day 1 for DreamHack's format, they have 8 groups of 4, double elimination bracket, top 2 move on. One thing I do like about this is it basically seeds it like you normally would see it. Be 1 seed, then probably a 15 and an 18 seed, because you don't want 16 there necessarily, because you don't want rematches. But still, something similar to that. Then the 32 seed. So generally, 1 seed shouldn't have a problem. But if there is an upset, that 15 seed, if they beat the 1 seed, they take over that 1 seed spot going into day 2, while the number 1 seed would take the 15 spot going into day 2. So, like, then that's how you start getting groups of death when there's some upsets going on. And I don't actually mind that. The thing I don't like at all is a 4-team double elimination bracket will result in so many rematches to try and qualify for day 2. Like, in a perfect world, say that bracket that we were just talking about, the number 1 seed, the 15 seed, and the 18 seed, and the 32 seed. Well, the 1 seed is going to beat the 32 seed in round number 1. 15 and 18, it's going to be a very close game. We'll say 15 moves on in a 3-2 or a 2-1 because it's best of 3. Then, number 1 seed is going to beat the 15 seed. So they're going to be in, and that's it. So that's all they have to do. They just have to get in through the uppers. They're good. They're golden. They're through. 15 seed loses. Now, the 18 seed is playing the 32 seed. It should be a very, very simple game for them. They win that game. Now, we have the 15 and 18 seed matching up again. Well, it just basically means their first game really didn't mean anything unless something extreme happens on the other side. That's why I don't really like groups of 4. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me unless you only have 4 PCs. Then you might want to do it to not hold things up. Generally, though, at DreamHack, I think they have at least 8 groups of PCs for these teams. it's tough, like, because again, it comes down to that budget thing, but you could kind of like stagger these games out and still have a good flow going with groups of 8, which I'll get into in a little bit. But anyway, day 2, same exact thing. 4 groups of 4 now. We're down to 16 teams. Double elimination bracket. Top 2 move to the bracket. Again, I don't mind it that much. I like the idea of like teams have second lives and stuff like that, and seeding can be rearranged because, again, one thing I think Rocket League desperately needs is we need a structure across all tournaments. And we need like a point system somehow to seed these teams effectively and based on a certain criteria so everyone knows why they're seeded where they are. Right now, it's just guesswork. And going into this DreamHack, it is complete guesswork because right now most teams have not played in this offseason all that much. Some teams just barely started playing last week, and we saw in the Hyper Cup lots of upsets or lots of weird results, in quotes, because a lot of teams are out of practice. But where do you seed them now for DreamHack? So seeds can be a little bit scary, and that's why I do like this day 1 and day 2 approach of like, seeds can kind of get rearranged a bit here because of upset losses, but as long as you win 2 of your games, then you're still into the next round. You might have a tougher group, but you put yourself in that situation because of earlier upset losses. So I don't mind that, but again, rematches are going to happen all the time. So in this case, say it's 1, 8, 9, and 16 in the same group. 1 and 16 play, 1 moves on. 8, 9, extremely close match. We'll say 8 moves on. 1 beats 8, 9 beats 16, and we're right back in the same exact situation. 8 versus 9. Their first game doesn't matter at all. And then what if 8 3-0'd them in round 1, and then 9 wins 3-2 in the round 2. 9 moves on. It's like, it just doesn't feel great. To me personally, I just don't like rematches at all. And of course, you might get rematches from like day 1 to day 3. The way DreamHack is doing it, it's a very rare case, but you might have rematches from day 1 all the way down to day 3, but that's the only place. So it would only be in day 3. Besides those lower bracket games, like when you're in the same group. But these lower bracket, like those games are going to be so many rematches. There's going to be rematch after rematch. I'm just not a huge fan of that whatsoever. Then, day 3, 8-team single elimination bracket. I love single elimination brackets. I don't understand why people don't like this. It comes down to, like, you have to show up on that day and win the games. Like, double elimination, it, like, gets drawn out. And then, obviously, like, some of the games just don't feel like they matter as much. Like, when Flipside beat Selfless in, what was it, World Championship 3, and the 0-second goal by Cooks here, then the overtime goal. It's like, yeah, it was a big moment, but it would have been so much bigger if that was Flipside's life on the line, and it wasn't. And Selfless, they still had another shot as well. It's just like, I don't know. I personally love single elimination rounds. Of course, a little harder to seed, but if you have seeds coming in and all these seeds are moving on day 1 and day 2, you can kind of get it pretty correct. And obviously, the tops of the groups from day 2 will play the bottom of the group, or the second place from day 2. So it works out okay. And with so many events now with Rocket League, it doesn't matter as much. Like, all right, you might have had a bad draw, but still, you got to win the games. It's that simple. So I personally love single elimination. We'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. So that's DreamHack's format. Here's what my format would be. Just a very slight tweak on DreamHack's format. I want 4 groups of 8, double elimination bracket, top 4 move on. So in this case, I'm not sure exactly the seeding here, but we'll say, I think it's like 1, 8. Well, all right. So let's go back down to groups of 4. So we had 1, 32, 16, 17, or 15, 18, whatever you want. When you win those rounds, so 15 and 18, whoever wins that game, they move on to play the loser of that other group of 4 that's in their group. So say it's seeds 2, 15, or, 16 and 17, and then 31. So 16 and 17 play. Whoever wins that, they would play the loser of the 15 and 18 game from the upper bracket in the lower bracket to qualify. You would still qualify after winning 2 games. So in the case of the number 1 seed, they would never play the 2 seed. They would win their first 2 games, and they're through. So it's pretty much the same exact way. The only thing that changes is the lower round games to qualify. You then have the winner from round 1 on like the upper side of the group will play the winner or will play the loser of round 1 on the lower side of the group. So that's where you start getting it a little bit mix and match. So in this instance, you would have 15, 16, 17, and 18 all in the same group. 15 and 18 would play. 15 wins and 16 wins in their first rounds. 16 versus 17, 15 versus 18. Now, when they eventually come back around because they beat the 31 and 32 seeds, now you have 15 would then play 17 to qualify because they already played 18. And then 16 would play 18 to qualify as well because they've already played 17. And it's just like the weaker opponent from the upper bracket instead of like, oh, we're just playing the same exact team again and now who knows who's going to make it. So that's the only slight tweak I would do. Same exact thing on day 2, but instead it would be 2 groups of 8. But the same thing, the lower qualifying games should never be rematches. So I would love it if, what I said before, I'm not going to repeat it again. And then again, 8-team single elimination bracket. That's where I would stand. Now keep in mind, again, like in these groups, seeds can swap. So if a 15 beats a 2, then the 15 becomes the 2 seed, and that's just the way it is. Or say a 6 seed loses to a 12 seed or whatever, I think it would be an 11 seed. Then the 11 seed would become the 6 seed, just to move around these seeds a bit. Again, there's a lot of teams here that are going to be extremely close. There's like there's probably like 20 teams that could probably beat any one of the other ones at this DreamHack. And maybe more, who knows? We'll see when we get there. So that's what I would do to just slightly tweak it. Now, of course, you would want these groups of 8 to all be playing roughly around the same time. But you could stagger it a bit if you needed to. And there you go. The thing is with the stream games, I think DreamHack is literally showing every single qualifying game on day 1. And it's best of 3, so you have a chance to do it. I don't really think that's necessary. Like, I think it's necessary to show the winners rounds, because that's like a preview of day 2, probably. But, like, to show, like, the 16 seed making it, when you're not going to show them on day 2, because you're not going to show lower round 1 games where the 16 seed will most likely lose. I just don't see the reason to show all of the lower round games. Like, you can show a couple. Like, you don't have to show every single one, but, like, show the closer games. And show all the upper round winners. And also don't start on winners round 1. I believe we're starting on winners round 1. I would just start, you know, 1 game in, where it's winners round 2 to advance. And then, like, that's, like, the best seeds of the next groups coming up. But that's just me. And that way, you could probably make it best of 5s, possibly, because the stream wouldn't have to show as much. And that usually holds a lot of things up. So I would prefer that. But we'll continue. Some Twitter alternatives that we got. Tyler, he says, Black Ops 2 World Champs was a perfect group play into tournament into top 4. One thing I don't like about group play, so they had, I believe it was 8 groups of 4? Yeah, it was 8 groups of 4. Then it was a 16-team double elimination bracket. That just takes way too long. And this was in 3 days, to my knowledge, because it said the dates from his link were just in 3 days. And I was like, one, you can't show every single one of those games. Not even close. You can't even show a lot of the upper bracket because of how many games it is. And, of course, in group play, you really can't show, like, most of those games. There just have to be a couple premier matchups. Like, to me, that system just doesn't work because of how many teams advance into this double, like, elimination bracket. It's just way too long for a day 3. Or even if it is just day 2 and 3, still be a lot of games. It would be really hard to get through them all. So, I'm not a huge fan of that. I get where he's going with the group play and stuff. And group play, like, again, I just don't think group play is that necessary. I don't like tie breaks. I would rather the double elimination bracket style, but just make it groups of 8 and just have the other 2 teams play each other from the other round. So, it's like, it's still basically groups of 4, but just the qualifying rounds are slightly different, so you don't get rematches. Now, Yummy, he comes up with a good one. 8 invited teams go to day 2. Now, again, with this invited stuff, this is where I think we drastically need, like, a point system in Rocket League across many tournaments, so we can actually invite certain teams that we know will be the best, and even if they're not the best, they were the best when it comes down to grabbing these points. It's very hard to just invite 8 teams. Like, I even had problems with who DreamHack invited for the 4th spot with PSG instead of Mocket. Very difficult, but I do like the idea of them, you know, just go to day 2. Let the plebs play on day 1. So we'll have the day 1. He has 4 pools of 6 round robin. Top 2 from each proceed to day 2. So he's trying to eliminate most of the players here. He's getting, so he still has 32 teams, but he's trying to, like, get rid of most. Round robin's going to take a really long time. That's the only problem, I think, with this is it depends on how many computers they have, but that is 60 matches. And if 6 matches are on at the same time, That's still 10 matches in a day. Very difficult to do. So that would be 6 matches, would be 12 teams playing at a time, which is a lot of computer space. And that's 10 matches in one day for like the admins and all that stuff. And that could take a relatively long time for them, for the setup process and all that, and the practice time or warm-up time. So that could take an extremely long time to do. But if they had more space, it's very possible. Then day 2 is 2 pools of 8 teams. Top 2 proceed to the upper bracket. 3rd and 4th proceed to the lower bracket. Now again, this is a lot of games. This is 28 games per group. So that's 56 games total. And then, like, what do you really show? Like, on stream, you can only show, what, 7 games? Roughly? Out of these 56 matchups? Which is a ton of games. So, like, for the viewer perspective, they're not really going to get anything out of this. Because it's going to be a lot of games that probably won't matter by the end of the day. Or you'll have to, like, hand pick them and really try, but it's not going to be that exciting because you might not see the really good teams because they might start out like 5-0. Like, you might see them like early on because they want to show them, but then it's like, all right, Gale Force is 5-0. There's no reason to show them anymore because we know they're advancing. And then you go to a double elimination, 4 in the upper, 4 in the lower, broadcast mostly upper bracket. And again, I feel like Yummies is extremely good for player fairness, but extremely poor for like viewer hype or showcase matches. Like, you're only going to show the upper bracket, which means you're mostly going to see 4 teams. You might, like, you'll see a little bit more. Like, you might be able to show some of the lower, but you might not have even seen them a lot in day 2, and players want to see a lot of different teams. You will see teams move on in the games that are, like, they're important, but there's no, like, elimination game, and then you won't see the actual team get eliminated. So if you're a fan of G2 and they lose in the upper bracket round 1, you're like, oh, crap. I can't even watch the other one. Unless, of course, there's multiple streams. But then that splits viewer base and, like... And that's a lot more of a hassle. A lot more of budget as well for that. And then you lose a lot of those storylines. Because you just don't know what's been happening in the lower rounds. Or even in any of the other games. Like, in the pools. For, like, me personally, like, on the desk, I will have no idea what any of these guys are doing, except for what their record was, because we won't be able to see the games. It's just impossible. So I think it is good for player fairness, but I think it's extremely poor for viewer hype and possibly budget as well for day 1. Next, we have John Always. He says, 32 plus teams. I like to see the MLG open format. So 12 of the 16 teams get auto-invited again. I think we need a point system. It's very similar to the other ones. To 4 pools. And they play those matches on day 1. So this I kind of like, in a way, where you have 4 groups, but you only have 3 teams in them so far. Because you're waiting on the plebs, we'll call them, to finish up their day 1 games. Again, we need a lot of space. Now, like MLG and like Call of Duty and stuff, they'll get hundreds of teams, or like 128 teams, which is not something that we expect in Rocket League for these events. So say it's still limited at 32. So you would have 12 teams invited, so that leaves 20 teams, and you try and, you know, play it out until you get down to your 4 teams. So we show the stream games on day 1, and they're all best of 5s. Now, that would be what? So if there's 3 teams, that's 3 matches per group. That is 12 matches. You won't be able to show every single one of them, but you will be able to show a decent amount. You'll be able to show 8 of them. And that's not a bad idea. Then you'll be able to see a lot of, like, different matches. You'll miss 1 game from each group, basically, which isn't that bad. And you'll get a lot of good perspective there. Meanwhile, the challenger and amateur teams, you know, play in a best of 3 open bracket where the top 4 qualify for pools. Day 2 is where I think it gets a little muddy. I'm not sure exactly where he wants to go with it. But day 2 would be just the 4 that qualified playing these really good teams and see if they can move up. The problem is, do they play those off stream? Because then what are you showing on stream? Basically, day 2 would just be like, these qualified teams, is there going to be a storyline of these teams beating these teams? Or is it just going to be kind of poo games? So maybe you only show 8 games on day 1. You save 4 of them for day 2. And when the qualified teams, if any of them are making runs, you show those games at the end of the day. And that would be a fun story. And I think that's a way you can kind of get around it. And then day 3, it goes into a bracket, I would say. So top 2 in each pool go to the championship. See, like, now this, Oh, wait, a total of 20 teams, pool play. All right, so this is a little bit different here. But say you had 16 teams and you want to get down to 8. You could still go down to 8 to a single limb or even add third place into like a lower bracket or something like that and keep it kind of okay. It would still be a double limb, so you wouldn't see every game. And I honestly, like, by the end of the tournament, I want to see every single game. I want to see when teams get eliminated. That's the story. Like, you've been watching them this entire 3 days, and then you don't actually see the end of their runs. It's like, it just feels kind of crappy to me as a viewer. So I would rather be single limb, and maybe you have playing games for those third place teams or something like that. Maybe between second and third place teams from different groups, you have play-ins to get into the bracket, and the first places are all like in the bracket. Maybe something like that. Who knows? But I like where he's going with this, and I actually do like the idea of like, hey, all these invited teams, you still play day 1, but it's mostly because it's for groups that are already in day 2. Like, you're kind of passing by the first part of the tournament while the first part of the tournament is going on. So that would be an interesting way to do it, and I think that has definitely... It's probably the best format that I've seen that we could tweak and use for Rocket League. That could be a lot of fun to watch. Next up, we'll talk about Swiss. And boy, do I not like Swiss. All right, so Swiss... It depends what you want to call Swiss. There's Swiss, where it's completely random, which is just dog shit, which is CSGO. It's just dog shit. Or it's Swiss, where it's reseeded, where that's basically a bracket. I'm not sure exactly how you want to reseed it, because do you want to reseed it where the number 1 seed, even if they lose, they just keep getting easy matches? Well, they're not a number 1 seed anymore. They're not that good. So that I don't really like. But if you swap seeds, so say the 8 seed play the 1 seed, then the 8 seed becomes the 1 seed, then that's just a bracket anyway. So you could just do a bracket to make it easier for the viewers. But Swiss random, just don't even approach me with that. It's just dog shit. But if you want to reseed, I don't like the idea of like the 1 seed, like if they lost early, oh, now they get to play the best or the worst team that lost. It's like, well, why? They're not a 1 seed, that's for sure, but where are they exactly? It's hard to measure exactly where they are. Again, if we had a point system of some type, then maybe I would think about that. But like Snazzy says, he wants Swiss day 1 and 2. The other problem with Swiss, you can only show a certain amount of games, and a lot of games are not going to matter as much, at least. Like when 2 2-0s are going against each other, like if you're trying to do the CSGO major style, where when you get 3 wins, you advance to the bracket, the other team is still going to make it anyway. They'll just have a slightly harder matchup going into the bracket. A possibility of a harder matchup because, again, it's random draws after the first round, so it could come down to like the number 1 and number 2 team playing each other in the second round, while the number 7 and 8 team played in the second round. So then it's like you're going to get a 1 versus a 7. That's not very hype at all. Top 8 bracket for day 3. I understand that. But again, like with the CSGO system, like another reason why I'm not a big fan of it, they randomly draw into groups or like into the bracket. Like 3-0s would play the 3-2s, but there's 3 3-2s and there's 3 3-1s. So randomly, 1 3-1 gets the easier matchup versus a 3-2. The other 3-1s have to play each other. It's not the greatest system in the world, in my opinion. Also with Swiss, like if you want like a legit like random Swiss, you need every game to go on at the same time, and you hope for no delays. As soon as one is delayed, everything gets delayed. So it's definitely not feasible for that reason. So that's why I would think you would reseed. But do you reseed where you flip the seeds? Then it's just a bracket. And if you reseed by keeping the number 1 where the number 1 is, you still have to wait for every single game to finish, or at least most of the games to finish, to even start round 2 because you're waiting on it. So I don't like Swiss at all. For the viewer perspective, it sucks. On Swiss Day 1, you're going to get, I don't know, like you'll get maybe some okay matches, but it's not really going to mean a lot on Swiss Day 1 and Day 2. Maybe it's the most fair if you're reseeding, maybe for players. I could argue that, sure, that's fine. But a bracket being a random draw and random matches, like if that's the case, I just don't think it's that great. We'll go over to Fickle for his ideas. So he wants day 1 Swiss groups of X. So he wants to like split it up into groups, which makes more sense for budget purposes and all that. So you put groups with, you know, some seeding in it. And then this determines seeds for day 2. The only thing I don't like about this is I think he keeps everyone alive. I would I would take out some teams from day 1 to day 2. He doesn't necessarily say that, but I would take some teams out because you don't need every team to, going on to day 2. But Swiss groups, it depends how big they are. Like, is it better to just do a double elimination bracket? Is it better to just do round robin at that point? Maybe. I don't know. Then you got 4 double elimination pools of X teams, using seeding from day 1 to seed matches. Now, again, it depends what Swiss you're doing. If it's random, it could hurt, but since it was split up a little bit more, it's a little bit better off. And it's tough to tell by how many teams are in each group. 2 teams advance from each group, winners and loser side. Top 8 double elimination, losers start in lower bracket, bracket reset in the grand final. So I do like the idea of a double elimination. Kind of what Yummy said earlier, where it's, you know, you throw 4 teams in the lowers, 4 teams in the uppers. You could realistically probably show all those games. It would be a really long day, but you could show most of them. Maybe if you don't show the lower round 1, and that's it. That's the only round you don't show. It's manageable. So, like, I could see that working. Again, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of double elim. I get why people want it, and, like, I would say it probably is more on the player fairness side. Like, I think it outweighs player fairness compared to viewer hype. Like, I think viewers are still hyped for those games, and they're still important. So, like, I would be willing to concede that. I just, a lot of people say, like, the CSGO major format is, like, perfect, and I'm like, it is not even close. It is, like, literally garbage, because it's just random, complete random. So it's like, why would we want to add more random? Like, I would rather be seeded. Now, the problem is with Rocket League, one reason to want random is maybe because we don't have a necessarily great way of seeding, because it's all just like, we think they're this good, so they're the #1 seed. But since there is no point system, maybe that's an argument as well of trying to randomly seed for that. And yeah, I think that's it. I think this is, yeah, and then the rest is the momentum from the last one. So there you go, guys. Tournament formats. What do you like? What do you want to see? What do you think of my opinions on stuff? And I want to hear what you guys think as well. But I'm excited for DreamHack. It might not be the most perfect format, like, in the world, but it still does the job, and I'm very excited to see who comes out on top. I'm excited to see some upsets. Expect something to happen, because it's going to be a lot of random teams. We will have a top 12 teams heading into DreamHack video next, which we'll play right before DreamHack, I guess on Thursday? Maybe? Yeah, Thursday. I guess it would have to be Thursday. So we'll do it on Thursday. But that'll do it for me, guys, for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me why I'm wrong in the comments below. Thanks. Have a good one. Later.